Welcome to Sacred Stories, Everyday Lives. I am Adeline St. Clair. There are stories in Scripture that feel, from their very first verse, as though the whole world is holding its breath. And the story of Joseph is one of them. It begins with a father's love, a love so visible, so particular, so tilted toward one son above all the others, that it would fracture a family and send a young man into slavery before he ever had the chance to understand what God was doing. Yet, God was doing something. This is the great tension at the heart of Joseph's story. His pain was real. The betrayal was real. The pit was real. And the silence of his brothers eating bread while their youngest sibling wept below them was real. And so was the wisdom of God, working through every wound, every cruelty, every sold coin and broken promise, towards something none of them could see from where they stood. So today, we are going to sit with the beginning of that story. We are not going to rush to the ending. We are not going to skip past the hard parts to get to the victory. We are going to stay here, in Genesis 37, and we ask, what happened? Why? And what it means for those of us who have also known the sting of being failed by the very people who should have loved us best. To understand the betrayal of Joseph, we must first understand the family into which he was born. Jacob, the patriarch, was himself a man shaped by favoritism. He had grown up as the second son, outmaneuvered by his older brother Esau in the eyes of their father Isaac, until his mother Rebekah helped him claim the blessing that was not his to take. Jacob knew rivalry. Jacob knew what it felt like to be seen as less than. And yet, in building his own household, Jacob repeated the very wound he had lived through. He had 12 sons by 4 women, Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. And the household was already threaded with old tensions. Leah had never been loved the way Rachel was loved. The sons of the handmaids occupied a lower rung. The rivalries of the mothers had found their way into the hearts of their children. Then, into this already complicated household, Joseph was born, the firstborn son of Rachel. She was the wife Jacob had loved above all others. From the beginning, Jacob made no effort to conceal his preference. Genesis 37, verse 3, tells us plainly, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors." The coat. We have heard of it so many times that it can feel like a mere detail. But in the ancient world, it was not a detail at all. It was a long, ornamented robe. And that kind of garment was of someone who would not be doing the hard labor of the fields. It was a garment of distinction, perhaps even of inheritance. To give it to Joseph was, in the eyes of every older brother watching, a wordless announcement. This is the one I have chosen. Genesis 37 verse 4 tells us, "And when his brethren saw that their father loved him more than all his brethren, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him." You see, there are families where the wounds of favoritism go so deep that normal conversation becomes impossible, where every exchange carries the weight of the unspoken grievance, the accumulated evidence of being seen as less worthy, less loved, less chosen. And that was the house of Jacob. And Joseph, young, beloved, perhaps not yet wise enough to understand the danger of what surrounded him, was living at the center of it. And then came the dreams. Joseph dreamed that his brothers' piles of grain bowed down to his. He dreamed that the sun and the moon and 11 stars bowed before him. These were not small dreams, and anyone with a keen sense of human nature might have advised a 17-year-old boy living in a household already hostile toward him to keep these dreams to himself. But Joseph did not. Now, we should be careful here. There is a long tradition in Christian thought of reading Joseph's sharing of his dreams as innocence rather than arrogance, and this reading deserves consideration. Although Joseph would go on to become a man of remarkable humility, restraint, and wisdom, it is possible that at 17, he was simply too young and too sheltered to read the room. It is possible that those dreams felt like gifts to him that he was meant to share, without yet understanding the cost. What is clear is the effect. Genesis 37:8 tells us that after the first dream, his brothers hated him yet the more for his dreams and for his words. After the second one, even his father rebuked him, though the text notes that his father observed the saying. Jacob had his own history with God's unusual choices. He had been the younger son who received the older son's blessing. He knew that God's designs did not always follow the expected order. He filed that dream away. But his sons did not file it away. They could not. There is something corrosive about envy that has been left to ferment. It does not stay still. It finds reasons to grow like mold. Every glance Joseph gave them, every report he brought back to their father, every day he wore that coat, all of it became evidence, fuel, confirmation of what they already believed, that Joseph thought himself above them, and that their father agreed. Whether or not that was true, it was what they believed. And their belief, in hearts already filled with resentment, becomes as powerful as fact. One day, Jacob sends Joseph to check on his brothers, who are grazing the flocks. The brothers see him coming from a long distance, which means that they have plenty of time to think, time to reconsider, time to choose something other than what they are about to choose. Genesis 37:19 records their words. "Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, let us slay him, and cast him into some pit." The plan, in its original form, was murder. Not exile, not humiliation, but murder. And they intended to tell their father that a wild beast had killed him. It is Reuben, the eldest, who intervenes. "Let us not kill him," he says. "Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness." The Bible tells us that Reuben intended to return and rescue Joseph, to bring him back to their father. But Reuben's intervention is complicated. He does the right thing in preventing murder, and yet he does not do enough. He does not stand fully against his brothers. He does not say, "We will do nothing to harm him." Instead, he negotiates with cruelty rather than refusing it. And then he disappears, presumably to tend the flocks, leaving Joseph in the pit, while his brothers sit near the pit to eat bread. There is a cruelty in that detail that the Bible does not comment on, because it does not need to. A young man, their brother, is in a pit nearby, and they are eating their meal. Perhaps the resentment had so calcified their hearts that they felt nothing. Perhaps they had talked themselves into believing this was justice. Perhaps the years of accumulated anger and resentment had made it possible to regard him not as a person, but as a problem that had finally been solved. But it did not matter what they told themselves. They sat around, hearing their brother's cries, and just ate. As his brothers sat there eating, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders appeared on the road, heading toward Egypt. And in seeing this, his brother Judah speaks. "What profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." This is one of the most disturbing verses in the passage, and we should not gloss over it. Judah's argument is not a moral one. He does not say, "This is wrong, and we should not do it." He says, "There is no profit in killing him." He frames his brother's life in terms of gain and loss, and then adds, almost as an afterthought, "For he is our brother and our flesh." The other brothers listen to Judah. They pull Joseph out of the pit and sell him for 20 pieces of silver. 20 pieces of silver. That was the price of a young male slave, according to the legal codes of the ancient Near East. Joseph's worth, in the economy of his brother's hatred, was a transaction. Reuben finally returns to the pit, and Joseph is gone. Genesis 37:29 says simply, "And Reuben returned unto the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit. He tore his clothes." Reuben tore his clothes. Remember from our previous episode of Job that this was the ancient expression of grief. His grief was so overwhelming, he could not contain it. Whether he felt guilt, or sorrow, or helplessness, or all three, the text does not say. What it records is that he said to his brothers, "The boy is gone, and I, where shall I go?" Here is a man who knows he has failed his brother. He failed to protect, failed to lead, and failed to follow through on the intention he had formed. He does not know yet where to put that failure. His brothers, however, have a plan. They take Joseph's coat, the symbol of everything that had divided them, and they slaughter a goat. Then they dip the coat in its blood and bring it to their father. And Jacob, who had once deceived his own father with the skin of a goat, is now deceived by his sons with the blood of one. He recognizes the coat. "It is my son's coat," he says. "An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn in pieces." Jacob mourned, tore his clothes, and put on sackcloth. He refused to be comforted, saying, "I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning." His children gathered around him, attempting to comfort him, and he refused them. They were the very ones who had caused his grief. They stood around their father's suffering, having created it, offering consolation they had no right to offer. It is one of the most devastating moments in the entire narrative. It would be easy, and perhaps satisfying, to simply condemn Joseph's brothers. What they did was wrong. But the story does not invite us merely to condemn them. It invites us to understand them, and in understanding them, to recognize the landscape of the human heart. What the brothers suffered was real. The favoritism of their father was not a small thing, not a minor inconvenience. It was a daily message, delivered through glances and garments, and the particular warmth reserved for Joseph, that they were less, that they did not occupy the same place in their father's heart, that their labor and their presence and their lives were, in some way, unimportant. Favoritism within a family causes wounds. Sometimes it is the accumulation of small things like who is asked for their opinion, whose achievements are celebrated, who is trusted with responsibility and who is not. And when that wound is never acknowledged, never healed, never addressed, it does not disappear. It goes deeper and grows roots. By the time Joseph came walking across that field toward his brothers at Dothan, their resentment had grown for years. The dreams had watered those roots. The colourful coat had fed it like fertilizer. And the long, unspoken grievance of feeling unloved by their father had given it a depth that could, in the worst moment, override everything else they knew to be right. This does not excuse what they did, but it explains how regular human beings, people who were not monsters, people who would go on to become the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel, arrived at a place where they could sit down and eat while their brother cried out from a pit. Unhealed wounds do not stay dormant. And when those wounds are old enough and the moment is charged, they can find to be expressed in ways that shock even the people acting on them. And what of Joseph himself? He is 17 years old. He has been stripped of his coat, thrown into a pit, and sold into slavery by his own brothers. Everything that defined his place in the world, his father's favor, his home, his family, his future, has been taken from him in a single afternoon. The text gives us very little of Joseph's feelings of betrayal in this moment. But there is one verse, in the middle of a later exchange that has not yet happened, where the crack in the story opens briefly. When Joseph's brothers eventually come to Egypt and face him across the years, we are told that Joseph remembered the affliction of his brothers' treatment of him, and that he turned away from them and wept. His grief was real, and he had carried it for so long. But what we see in the whole of Joseph's story is a man who, somehow, remarkably, did not allow the wound to define him. He did not become a bitter person. He did not shrink into despair. He did not spend his years in Potiphar's house or in prison plotting revenge. He worked. He served faithfully. He interpreted dreams. He used whatever was given to him, in whatever diminished and painful circumstance he found himself, as full as he could. How does a person do that? The text gives us the answer. The Lord was with Joseph. That is the whole story. Not Joseph's strength or Joseph's wisdom or Joseph's remarkable resilience, though all of those things are present, but the presence of God in a life that had every earthly reason to fall apart. Joseph could not have known, in that pit, what God was doing. He could not have seen or understood why. He could not have imagined Egypt, or Pharaoh, or the famine, or the moment when his brothers would kneel before him without recognizing him. He could not have known any of it. He only had what he had: a God who had not left him, and a character that refused, even under immense pressure, to collapse. This is perhaps the most important thing to say about the story of Joseph's betrayal, and it is also the most delicate. God did not cause what the brothers did. He did not plant the resentment in their hearts. He did not engineer the coat or the dreams or the caravan of traders as part of his plan. The brothers acted from their own hearts, from their own jealousy, their own fear, their own unhealed wounds. That is the testimony of the text. And yet, Joseph himself, in the extraordinary moment of reconciliation at the end of his story, will say to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." This is not a statement that erases the evil that had been done. It is not a theological sleight of hand that turns the betrayal into something that was not really a betrayal. The harm was real. The brothers intended it as harm, and God, without becoming the author of that harm, was at work within it, through it, beyond it. This is the mystery at the center of this story, his faith. It does not promise that God will prevent suffering. It promises that God is present within suffering, working toward ends that our limited sight cannot yet perceive. For those of us who have experienced betrayal, by family, by friends, by institutions, by people we trusted, this is not a simple comfort. It does not make the wound smaller. It does not explain why God permitted what was permitted, but it does offer the assurance that our story is not over, that the pit is not the end, and that the one who was with Joseph in every diminished and painful circumstance is the same one who is with us. The story of Joseph's betrayal is intentional. His life is long, and the healing, when it comes, will be costly and beautiful, and unlike anything his brothers or his father could have imagined from the dark afternoon in that field. But what we can carry away from this chapter, from these early, painful pages, are several things worth holding. That favoritism wounds everyone. It touches the favored child, the overlooked ones, and the parent who does not see what they are creating. That resentment, left unaddressed and unhealed, is capable of driving people toward actions they would never have believed themselves capable of. And that God is not absent from the worst moments of our lives, even when every circumstance insists otherwise. And that the kind of faith Joseph carried into Egypt is not the absence of grief. It is the refusal to let grief have the final word. If you are in a pit today, if something has been taken from you, if you have been failed by someone who should have loved you better, I want to offer you the quiet and deeply serious hope of this story. The Lord is with you. The story is not finished, and the same God who worked through the worst afternoon of Joseph's life is still at work in yours. Thank you for spending this time with me today. May these sacred stories continue to meet you in the ordinary moments of your life, especially in those moments when the reasonable choice and the faithful choice are not the same thing. You have the wisdom to discern the difference and the strength to choose well. If this story touched your heart, bless us with a like. Do not be afraid to share this video with someone in your life that may need this message. Share your own experience with us in the comments. Your testimony may help someone else turn to Christ. Subscribe if you would like to hear more stories. New episodes will be shared every Sunday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Do not forget to download our free Bible study for this episode, linked in the description below. Tag us by using hashtag #SSEL Bible Study. Enjoy, and may God bless you. I hope to see you again.